Fat and ugly, my husband said, so I took our savings and invested $50,000 in me. For years, I believed every single cruel word my husband threw at me like weapons specifically designed to destroy my self-worth piece by piece, especially the night he looked me directly in the eyes with pure contempt and called me fat and ugly, as if I didn't deserve the life we'd built together over 14 years of marriage, as if I should be grateful he even tolerated my presence. His words were carefully designed to make me feel small, worthless, pathetic, grateful that someone like him would even consider staying with someone like me. But humiliation has a strange way of turning into something much more powerful when you finally stop accepting it as truth. The very next morning after that devastating insult that should have broken me completely, I walked into our bank with my head held high, withdrew $50,000 from our joint savings account without asking his permission, and made a decision that would change absolutely everything. I invested every single cent into myself, my body, my mind, my confidence, my complete transformation into someone new. And when I walked back into our house 6 months later, looking and feeling like a completely different woman, strong and confident and powerful, he absolutely wasn't ready for who I had become or what I was about to do next. But before I tell you about the insult that changed everything, the $50,000 I spent transforming myself, and the absolute shock on my husband's face when he saw the new me, you need to do 4 critical things right this second. Slam that subscribe button like you're reclaiming your power from everyone who ever diminished you. Smash that like button until it knows you're done being disrespected and undervalued. Drop a comment telling me the exact moment you decided you deserved, better than what you were accepting. And share this video, because every woman who's ever been made to feel small needs to hear this story of transformation. Because this is about revenge, self-worth, investing in yourself, and what happens when you finally stop accepting someone else's cruel assessment of your value. Every single word is true, and it's going to inspire you to see your own worth. My name is Andrea. I'm 41 years old, and 8 months ago, I took our entire life savings and spent it completely on transforming myself after my husband spent 14 years systematically destroying my self-esteem with constant criticism. What I did with that money and what happened when I came back is the ultimate revenge story. Let me give you the complete background of our marriage so you understand exactly how I got to the point of withdrawing $50,000 without asking permission or caring about consequences. I met my husband Robert when I was 25 and he was 28. I was working as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized law firm. He was a mid-level manager at a manufacturing company in our city. We met through a mutual friend at a group dinner at a casual restaurant. When we first met, I was young, reasonably attractive, had a good figure from being naturally active in my early 20s. I wasn't a model or anything extraordinary, just a normal young woman with average looks and a healthy body. Robert was decent looking, had a stable job with benefits, seemed nice enough in social situations. Nothing particularly special or remarkable about our origin story. Just 2 ordinary people who met, started dating, and fell into a relationship that seemed normal and healthy at the time. We dated for 2 years before getting married. During the dating period, Robert was generally kind and respectful most of the time. There were occasional comments that seemed slightly mean or unnecessarily dismissive, but nothing that raised major red flags in my mind. He'd make jokes about my cooking not being as good as his mother's traditional recipes, or comment that a particular outfit made me look bigger than I actually was. But I rationalized these as normal couple teasing rather than signs of deeper disrespect or cruelty. We got married when I was 27 in a modest wedding ceremony with about 100 guests at a local venue. Bought a small house in a working-class neighborhood that we could afford on our combined incomes. I continued my administrative job while Robert continued his manufacturing management position. We settled into married life that seemed completely normal from the outside perspective. The first major change in our relationship dynamic came about a year into our marriage when I gained some weight. Not a dramatic amount by any objective measure, maybe 15 pounds, which is pretty normal for women in their late 20s who've settled into marriage and aren't as naturally active as they were in their early 20s. But Robert noticed immediately and started making pointed comments. "You're getting a little thick around the middle," he'd say while I was getting dressed in the morning. "Maybe you should skip dessert tonight." Those pants are getting tight on you. You should probably go up a size." The comments were constant and deliberately designed to make me feel self-conscious about my body. When I'd get upset about the criticism, Robert would claim he was just being honest and looking out for my health and well-being, that he loved me and wanted me to stay attractive for him, that if he didn't tell me the truth, who would? I internalized these comments completely and started dieting constantly, obsessively. I'd lose a few pounds, Robert would be happy and complimentary briefly, then I'd gain them back and the negative comments would resume immediately. This exhausting cycle continued for years. I was constantly thinking about my weight, constantly trying new diets and exercise programs, constantly feeling like I was failing because I couldn't maintain the exact body Robert wanted me to have. Around year 3 of our marriage, the criticism expanded beyond just weight to encompass my appearance in general. Robert started commenting on everything about how I looked. My hair looked better when it was longer and more feminine. That shirt was unflattering and made me look frumpy. My makeup looked overdone or not done enough depending on his mood. I should dress more professionally for my job or less boringly for social events. The constant stream of criticism about every aspect of my appearance made me increasingly insecure and anxious about how I looked at all times. But Robert framed all of this constant criticism as being helpful and supportive. He'd say he was giving me constructive feedback because he cared about me and my success, that other husbands wouldn't be honest about these things, but he loved me enough to help me improve myself. He positioned his cruelty as kindness, and I believed him completely because I desperately wanted to believe my husband had my best interests at heart. Around year 5 of our marriage, I had gained maybe 25 pounds total from when we first met at that dinner. I was still a normal, healthy weight for my height and age, just not as thin as I'd been at 25. But to hear Robert talk about it constantly, you'd think I'd become morbidly obese and completely unrecognizable. He started making comments about being embarrassed to be seen with me in public, about me letting myself go and not caring about our marriage, about how he deserved better than a wife who didn't take care of herself properly. The psychological impact of constant criticism over years is absolutely devastating in ways people who haven't experienced it can't fully understand or appreciate. I started avoiding mirrors because I didn't want to see what Robert apparently saw when he looked at me. I'd dress in baggy, shapeless clothes to hide my body from view and judgment. I stopped wanting to go out with friends because I felt ugly and didn't want people to see me and judge me the way Robert did. My entire self-worth became completely tied to Robert's perception of my appearance, and since that perception was relentlessly negative, I felt worthless. Around year 7, Robert started making cruel jokes about my weight in front of other people, publicly humiliating me. At family dinners with his parents and siblings, he'd comment loudly that I should skip seconds because I'd gained enough weight already and didn't need more food. At parties with friends, he'd make references to me being heavy or joke about putting me on a strict diet. These public humiliations were absolutely devastating, but when I'd get upset afterward, Robert would accuse me of being too sensitive and not being able to take a simple joke. He'd say everyone knew he was just kidding around, and I was embarrassing him by overreacting emotionally. I also started noticing that Robert was increasingly distant and critical in general, not just about my appearance but about everything. He'd dismiss my opinions in conversations, talk over me when I was speaking, make me feel stupid for not knowing things he knew. He'd criticize my housekeeping skills, my cooking abilities, my job performance, my family members, my friends, everything. Everything about me was subject to his constant judgment and found wanting in some way. But I stayed in this marriage because by this point, my self-esteem was so thoroughly destroyed that I genuinely believed Robert was completely right about everything. That I was fat, ugly, stupid, boring, lucky that anyone would put up with me at all. That if I left Robert, no one else would ever want me or love me. That I should be grateful Robert stayed with me despite all my numerous flaws. This is what years of emotional abuse does to a person. It makes you believe the abuser's narrative about who you are. Around year 10 of our marriage, I'd gained a bit more weight, maybe 35 pounds total from when we first met. I was dealing with some health issues that made weight management harder, plus the constant stress of living with relentless criticism wasn't helping my physical or mental health. but I was still a normal-sized woman by any objective standard, not obese or dangerously unhealthy, just not thin. Yet Robert acted like I'd become completely unrecognizable and physically repulsive to him. He started sleeping in the guest room regularly, claiming my snoring kept him awake at night, though I'd never snored before according to him in all our previous years together. He stopped being physically affectionate entirely. He'd actually flinch away visibly if I tried to touch him or initiate any intimacy. He made it abundantly clear that my body disgusted him and he could barely stand to be near me physically. The rejection was absolutely crushing to experience daily. Around year 12, I started seriously suspecting Robert was having an affair with someone else. He was coming home late from work frequently with vague excuses, being extremely secretive with his phone and computer, paying much more attention to his own appearance while simultaneously criticizing mine constantly. When I'd ask directly if he was seeing someone else, he'd laugh cruelly and say, "Why would I cheat on you? I can barely stand the wife I have. Why would I want to deal with another woman?" The clear implication being that I was so undesirable that infidelity wasn't even worth the effort for him. But I later discovered through checking phone records that he was indeed having an affair with a woman from his workplace. A younger, thinner woman who he'd later tell me dismissively was everything you're not and will never be. The affair lasted about 8 months before it ended for reasons I never learned, though I didn't discover any of this until much later. Year 13 was when things reached an absolute breaking point in our marriage. Robert's criticism became even more vicious, personal, and cruel than it had been before. He'd tell me directly that I was disgusting to look at, that I'd let myself go beyond any possible repair, that I was an embarrassment to him in front of his colleagues and friends, that he genuinely regretted marrying me and wished he'd chosen differently, that if we didn't have shared assets and complicated finances, and it wasn't such a legal hassle, he'd leave me immediately. Every single day brought new insults specifically designed to remind me how worthless I supposedly was. I was deeply depressed by this point in our marriage. I'd stopped taking care of myself because what was the point when nothing satisfied Robert? Robert was going to criticize me regardless of what I did. I'd stopped seeing friends regularly because I was ashamed of myself and didn't want them to see what I'd become. I'd stopped engaging in hobbies or interests that used to bring me joy. I just existed in this constant state of shame and self-loathing, believing everything Robert told me about myself was objective truth. Then came the specific night that changed everything permanently. We were getting ready for bed like usual, and I'd put on pajamas that Robert deemed particularly unflattering. He looked at me with pure disgust and contempt, and said with complete conviction, "God, you're fat and ugly. I can't believe this is what my wife looks like now. You're absolutely pathetic." Something fundamental in me broke in that exact moment. Not broke as in shattered further into pieces, but broke as in snapped completely free from his control. I looked at Robert, really looked at him clearly, and I saw him accurately for the first time in years. He wasn't some authority figure whose opinion defined my worth and value. He was just a cruel, small, insecure man who'd spent 14 years systematically destroying my self-esteem to make himself feel powerful and superior, and I was completely done accepting it. I didn't say anything to Robert that night. I just went to sleep in the guest room alone. But the next morning, I woke up with absolute clarity about exactly what I was going to do. I got dressed carefully, drove directly to our bank, and withdrew $50,000 from our joint savings account. It was money we'd been saving for years, supposedly for retirement or emergencies. Well, this was my emergency escape from a marriage that was killing me slowly. I took that $50,000 and I invested every single cent into myself over the following months. First, I hired the best divorce attorney in the city and put her on retainer with a $10,000 payment up front. Then, I used the rest of the money systematically for my complete transformation. I joined an expensive gym with personal trainers and nutritionists on staff, not to lose weight for Robert or to meet his impossible standards, but to become strong and healthy for myself. I hired a therapist who specialized in recovering from emotional abuse and rebuilding self-esteem. I got a complete makeover, entirely new wardrobe, professional hairstyle, skincare treatments, everything. I took professional development courses to advance my career prospects. I invested in myself in every single way I'd neglected for 14 years. I also moved out of our house into a small apartment I rented on my own. I left Robert a note that said simply, "I'm done accepting your assessment of my worth. I've taken money from our savings to invest in myself. My attorney will be in contact regarding divorce proceedings." Robert called me literally dozens of times that first day, oscillating wildly between rage that I'd taken his money without permission and panic that I was actually leaving him. I didn't answer a single call. I'd said everything I needed to say in that note. The next 6 months were simultaneously the hardest and most transformative of my entire life. I worked with my personal trainer 5 days a week, building real strength and endurance. I met with my therapist twice a week, methodically unpacking 14 years of emotional abuse and rebuilding my self-worth from nothing. I took the professional courses seriously and got a significant promotion at work that came with a substantial raise. I invested in my appearance not to please anyone else, but because I deserved to feel good about myself. The physical transformation was dramatic and visible. I lost about 40 pounds of fat and gained noticeable muscle definition. But more importantly than the physical changes, I transformed mentally and emotionally in ways that changed everything. I learned to value myself independent of anyone else's opinion. I learned that Robert's assessment of me was entirely about his need to control and diminish me, not about any actual flaws I possessed. I learned I deserved respect, kindness, and appreciation. 6 months after I left, the divorce was proceeding smoothly through the courts. Robert had tried various tactics, apologizing profusely and promising to change completely, getting angry and accusing me of abandoning our marriage, trying to turn mutual friends against me. None of it worked, because I was finally completely clear about what I deserved, and it definitely wasn't him. But I wanted Robert to see directly what he'd lost, to understand viscerally that the fat, ugly wife he'd spent years demeaning had transformed into someone he'd never have again. So I agreed to meet him at our old house to discuss dividing remaining possessions. I showed up looking and feeling better than I had in 15 years. I'd lost weight, gained muscle, had professional hair and makeup, wore a dress that showed off my transformed figure. But more than the physical changes, I carried myself with confidence Robert had never seen from me. I walked into that house like I owned it, which legally I half did. Robert's reaction when he saw me was absolutely priceless. His jaw literally dropped open. He stared at me like he couldn't process what he was seeing. "Andrea, is that really you?" "Yes, Robert. This is what happens when you invest in yourself instead of accepting someone else's diminishment." "You look incredible," he stammered awkwardly. "I mean, you've lost so much weight. You look like you did when we first met." "I look better than when we first met," I corrected firmly. "Because now I'm strong, confident, and completely clear about my worth. Something I wasn't back then." Robert tried various approaches during that meeting. He complimented me excessively and desperately. He said he'd been wrong about everything and wanted to try again. He said seeing me like this made him realize what he'd lost. He literally begged me to reconsider the divorce. I looked at him with complete clarity. "Robert, you spent 14 years telling me I was fat, ugly, worthless, disgusting. You criticized every aspect of my appearance and personality. You made me feel small so you could feel big. And now that I've transformed myself, you suddenly want me back? That's not how this works." "I was wrong," Robert said, actually crying now. "I see that now. You're beautiful. You've always been beautiful. I was cruel and I'm sorry. You're only sorry because you see me as valuable now based on how I look. But I was always valuable, Robert. Even when I gained weight, even when I didn't meet your beauty standards, I was still a whole person deserving of respect and kindness. You couldn't see that because you needed me to feel worthless to maintain your power over me." The divorce was finalized 2 months later. I ended up keeping about half our remaining assets. More importantly, I kept my transformation, my newfound self-worth, and my freedom. The $50,000 was the best investment I'd ever made. So that's how my husband called me fat and ugly, and I took our $50,000 savings and invested it in transforming myself. If this inspired you, hit subscribe and like. Comment, what would you invest in yourself? This is Andrea, reminding you that you are worth investing in. Thanks for watching.